Good morning. My name is Jane Wales, and I want to welcome you to the Global Philanthropy Forum. I can feel you still networking, so obviously that process worked. Over the next 2.5 days, we're going to focus on opportunity. Economies are growing, philanthropy is expanding, and digital tools are really empowering people at all levels of society. It's an enormous opportunity, and it may be because of our proximity to the notion of what could be, is what causes outrage in us over what is. The fact that a farmer could be starving, a child could be literally bought and sold. These are the kinds of things that inspire us to action. And I think that the one reason we can always sort of sense opportunity is that we do have a feeling that the kinds of problems that we'll discuss, and as well as their solutions, will be a matter of millions of individual choices, including ours. And so informing those choices is all important. So for those of you who are new to the Global Philanthropy Forum, I should probably say a word about who we are. We're a community. We seek to be our most strategic. Our focus is on results. Now, secondly, we're here to learn from you. This is a network that is all about peer learning. So for those of you who have traveled from very far, know that others have come so that they can learn from the expertise you have. So please share that expertise with them. Third, to make sure that you have every opportunity to do so, we're mixing it up a bit this year. And so following plenary panels in which issues will be teed up, we'll then move into, instead of the usual breakout session, we will move into problem-solving working groups in which you roll up your sleeves side by side and consider the ways in which ingenuity can be unleashed, the kind of ingenuity that we know exists in every country, in every community, and in fact in every individual. So solving problems together, finding those opportunities together is what we hope your 2.5 days will be all about, so that some of the problems we face can be conquered. Fourth, we will ask the question of how data, big and small, can be applied to the problems we face, and recognize that that data can actually change the very nature of the problem, and it can expand the possible solutions. Now, having said that we'll ask about data, that's not all we'll ask. We'll ask about the role for policy, the role for private enterprise, the role for philanthropy, the role for the engagement of the ultimate beneficiaries in the design phase, throughout each step, each choice, each decision along the way. Fifth, we're going to focus on 4 broad substantive themes, but you should feel free to take us beyond. We'll focus on sustainable agriculture, the issue of food security, and we'll be led by Judith Roden of the Rockefeller Foundation and an exploration of issues that are related to that, ways to enhance productivity, ways to ensure the nutritional value of the food that's produced, and ways to make it improve livelihoods on the part of the many small farmers that exist around the world. Our second topic is a related one. It's global health. Here again, this is a field that sometimes we worry is data poor. That reality may be something we can change in the digital age. I'm going to ask somebody to bring me a little bit of water. I'm just getting over a flu, and antibiotics really dry you up. Our third topic will be education and learning. Thank you, Jan. I said we're a community. Thank you, Jan. Our third topic will be education and learning, and we'll be led by Rita Roy of the MasterCard Foundation to consider not only questions of access, but also questions of quality of education, and of course, the issue of how to ensure that we're preparing the students of today for the jobs of tomorrow. Now, what I skipped while coughing is the fact that Kim Hamilton of the Gates Foundation will be leading our conversation about global health. Finally, we'll come to global trafficking, in fact, to human trafficking. And this issue of slavery unfortunately calls out for us the fact that digital tools are just that, tools. They're indifferent to the purpose of their use. And so the very tools that we feel expand our opportunities and the opportunities of others throughout the world also enable traffickers to be even more efficient in their cruel trade. Randy Newcomb of Humanity United is kind enough to walk us through, help us understand the issues at stake, and then lead a series of working groups afterwards to help us get our hands around those problems. This division of labor brings me to the sixth point I wanted to make about the Global Philanthropy Forum, and that is that we're all about partnership. We don't ask you to go it alone. We certainly don't ask that of us. And so we're very grateful to these leaders and their foundations that they lead for helping to co-create these panels and lead the working groups that follow. We also have a wonderful partnership with the Vodafone Foundation. This will be the 5th year of partnering with them. Aha, I'm double mic'd. And they will announce tomorrow night their Innovation Challenge, the Vodafone Innovation Challenge, which is an effort to identify those and call out and celebrate those who have found novel ways to apply mobile technology to addressing some of the world's largest problems. And while we're on the topic of celebration, I should note that tonight we'll have a very special celebration. This one is not an annual one. It, in fact, comes around only once a century. And this is the celebration of 100 years of organized philanthropy. We're being hosted by the Rockefeller Foundation. They've invited us to join us in this celebration. It is striking to me that sense of opportunity, that sense of urgency, that sense of need was just as strongly felt 100 years ago by John D. Rockefeller, his son, John Jr., and his children and other offspring along the way. And I think it's really fitting that these that this foundation, the foundation that bears their name and their legacy, has done so much to define strategic philanthropy in the modern day. So while John Rockefeller defined it way back when, 100 years ago, Rockefeller Foundation has now expanded our understanding of that tool to include such opportunities as impact investing. So we want to thank the Rockefeller Foundation for bringing this celebration to us. Thank you. Finally, since we're on the topic of history, let me just close with a little bit of history about us. 12 years ago, the Global Philanthropy Forum was founded here. There was a gathering of, I guess we gathered, I guess there were about 300 architects and beneficiaries of the information age, and of course the globalization that technology allowed. It had created great wealth, great opportunity, but it also underscored enormous disparities that were in fact growing. Disparities of income, disparities of opportunity. And these philanthropists, these newly successful business leaders wanted to see those opportunities more broadly, more equitably shared. And they came to define a type of philanthropy that would allow them to take on very, very large problems. Now, fast forward till now. Our various newest members sitting amongst you right now come from Lagos, from Nairobi, from Johannesburg, from Sao Paulo, from Mumbai. They are in emerging economies that have been expanding at an enormous rate. And they are individuals who have taken a look at this extraordinary economic growth and noted that while the growth is robust, it's not necessarily broad-based. And while development is really rapid, it may not be as inclusive as they want. And so they, much like the Silicon Valley philanthropists who are in this room, want to change that reality and ensure that the benefits of this kind of economic growth are more widely shared. And they have joined us in replicating the model of the Global Philanthropy Forum in the societies in which they live, work, and give. And so we see it as a special opportunity to have you get to know these newest members. I say that not only because they're defining and expanding philanthropy in their own societies, but because they have very specific knowledge that they can share with you as you invest and give in those same societies. This is important because I believe that the next great wave of philanthropic innovation will come from these emerging economies, will come from the South, just as 100 years ago they came from the home of John D. Rockefeller. So thank you for joining us. Take advantage of each other's knowledge. I can't wait for the 2 days ahead. Now, we're going to open with a conversation, and I'll say the word open a lot so folks will know to send our speakers up. But the conversation will be about the ways in which information and communications technology can be used, is being used, to inform policy, to enhance governance capability, and to spur economic activity at all levels of society. We're going to be joined by Paul Kukubo. He is he's CEO of Kenya's Information and Communications Technology Board. He's traveled all the way from Nairobi to be with us. The purpose of the ICT board is not only to grow the ICT sector in Kenya, but it's to transform Kenya's economy into a knowledge economy, creating jobs, creating whole industries along the way. At the same time, the ICT board is meant to help advance Kenya's open government initiative, and also to ensure e-governance, which is to say, to apply new technologies to the most efficient delivery of services, government services. Now, I mentioned before that all the problems we face and many of their solutions will be the result of individual choices. So we wanted someone who's actually an expert in how individuals think. Sendhil Mullainathan joins us to help us understand how individuals do the things they do. And when I say that, people like us, why we do the things we do and how you work around or work with the way our minds work. The organization he founded is Ideas 42. It combines behavioral economics with development economics to help inform the design of policies, of programs, and of various products that are aimed to help raise folks out of poverty. Finally, we're going to be joined by a third person remotely, and that's Neil Gershenfeld, director of MIT's Center for Bits and Atoms. Neil has been with us in previous years in person. This year, we've asked him to join us from Alaska so that we can see and be introduced to the latest Fab Lab. I feel like Marco Rubio. A bit about Fab Lab, where as we think about innovation, we think about the ecosphere, particularly for those of us lucky enough to live in such an ecosphere here in Silicon Valley, where all the elements, all the support structures for innovation exist. Neil takes us to remote locations and suggests that you can replicate, you can tap into that ecosphere online. And so Fab Labs provides $25,000 worth of machine tools plus an internet connection. this is my mic. I'm doing this wrong, aren't I? We're going to ask him to give us a quick tour of the Fab Lab, this newest one that's being created for a Native American community in Alaska, and he'll show us what digital fabrication is all about. Then we'll be joined on stage by two of his colleagues, two other members of the Maker Movement, Mike Estee and Danielle Applestone of Otherlab. So let me now move on to this conversation, and soon we'll be joined by them. And in the meanwhile, we'll probably get rid of this microphone because I'm simply no J-Lo. Can't do it. And I don't even have to dance. So let me join you, and we'll grab a handheld mic. Okay, great.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry to displace you so easily. So, Paul, I'm just going to start off with you because I want a sense. I mean, here you've done so much. In fact, ICT is these are the big drivers of the Kenyan economy. So, give us a sense of how the economy is doing. What is the growth rate? What about jobs? Talk a bit about what ICT has done for Kenya.
Thank you very much, Jane. I'm happy to be here. Let me just give you some historical perspective. In 2006, 2007, ICT was not even an economic driver in Kenya. It was early days. Our connectivity was erratic. Government invested substantially in getting undersea cables. We got new leadership. In the 5 or 6 years since, we've got a sector that is now sort of the home for most of the multinationals globally in Kenya. We also have a developed mobile money business. Right now, for example, we're talking about close to 18 million people who use mobile money in Kenya through the M-Pesa and other systems, doing about 10.5 million transactions a day. We have developed ecosystem with respect to mobile applications and IT innovations. We've got the first research lab established by IBM in Kenya, which is the first in Africa. So I think the qualitative and quantitative statistics are quite good. ICT as a sector is sitting at about $1 billion US, maybe $1.5 billion. And if you look at this, that breakup, it's made up of services, made up of infrastructure investments, and made up of packaged software. And then if you add the telco business, that will give you another probably $1.5 billion. So we're talking about a sector that's about $2 to $2.5 billion, and going to be about $3 billion in the next 3 years. Employing, in terms of people employed, we've got numbers that are sitting at about sort of 40,000 people employed in various services in the country, but the multiplier effect is actually a lot more substantial because a lot of the people who work in IT directly also serve other industries.
So, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key characteristics of a knowledge economy is that there are great disparities between those with education and those without.
Yes.
Right? There's huge differences, and those gaps that earning gap keeps growing. So what are the assumptions with regard to education?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kenya's going through massive changes at the moment. We've got a new constitution that we enacted about 2 years ago. We just had a successful election. The election has at the center, I mean, one of the election pledges was that from next year, every student going into elementary school will be going to learn with a laptop. I mean, it's a big promise. And it's a massive investment on the side of government. But what it signals, because there's been a lot of debate about whether we can or cannot achieve it, but what is more important about that discussion, and that's intent from the current president, is that it's a statement of intent about where we need to go. So for us, we look at education as being digitally delivered, and we will have to figure that out. We've got lots of helps, lots of partners who will come to the table, and that's why forums like this are important. We're going to have teachers properly retrained to deliver education through technology. And also, we've got to reorient our whole population around the benefits of ICT. And right now, as it is, we've done massive work in this respect. I mean, the current curriculum changes, the current university, the new University Act, the new Education Act, all have to do with an emphasis on IT as a core, on ICT as a core enabler of education, as well as a subject on its own.
So Sendhil, I mean, what is interesting about this notion of digitally delivered education, every parent wants their child to go to school, right? But for many families, that child's labor is essential to the income of the family. So talk a little bit about what keeps people from going to school, kids from having that opportunity, and how we can work around that with smart programs.
So, I mean, I think what you alluded to is something I often think of as sort of the intention-action divide. Wow, it's really weird to hear yourself. Anyway, I think of this as the intention-action divide. What I mean by that is, if you look at yourself this morning, think about what time did you wake up? Think about what time you intended to wake up when you went to sleep last night. Those are two very different numbers. Now, what's amazing is all of you are pretty experienced at waking up in the morning. You've done it many times, and you still haven't cracked this problem. That's just a reminder that in our own lives, we understand that there are many things we want to do that we badly want to do. For example, you say, my spouse and I fight about little things. We're not going to do that anymore. But yet, you just, when the moment comes, you just can't control yourself. It's very hard to do things that we want to get done, especially when those things need to be done every day, consistently, under duress, under complicated circumstances. Why do I bring that up with education? Picture yourself as a parent in a rural area or in an urban slum. What is it you want to do? I've done a lot of field work in India. I've only been to Kenya once. It was terrific, but not that much field work. In India, you ask any parent if you had an extra 100 rupees or 1,000 rupees or 5,000 rupees, what would you do? They all say education and then health. So at least in India, there's a big desire. The intention is there. People want their children to go to school. I'm not saying that's true everywhere, but it's definitely there in many places. But even in India, even when parents are saying it, it doesn't happen. So what happens? So I think it's a little bit like you waking up in the morning. Picture yourself, you've got a lot going on in your life, a lot going on in your mind. You're worried, how will the crop turn out? You're worried about the fact that your bicycle just broke and you need to get money to fix that chain, and you're trying to figure out how to do all that. While all this is going on, there's a kid who should get to school. But getting to school is not an easy activity. For us, it's just put them on the bus or whatever it might be. Here, the kid says, I don't want to go to school. And you've got to cajole them into going to school. And you've got to force them into going to school. You've got to monitor that actually they did go to school because you're sending them out and walking them there. We've done field work where parents, you ask them about the attendance of children and you compare it to the actual attendance of children, there's a big gap. Parents don't know whether the kids went to school or not because they don't have the time or the bandwidth to follow through. So I think these follow-through problems are big in education and in a variety of places. It's not I think that's the lowest hanging fruit, not trying to create the desire, but trying to capitalize on the desire that's already there.
So we will talk a little bit about program design, or do you call it behavioral design?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
In a minute, and I thought, Paul, we turn back to you just for 1 second, because when I think about the Kenyan government strategy, I think it's about, ensuring the infrastructure, investing in education and health. By infrastructure, I mean regulatory as well as physical, physical and legal. But then to get out of the way to ensure that innovation can occur. And when you privatized, for example, telecom. Safaricom came into existence, a private corporation, and it created, in turn, something called M-Pesa that you referenced earlier. This is a mobile money service. It's been a stunning success. I mean, I think that it's got more transfers, money transfers in Kenya than Western Union has
globally.
In the whole world, right? So say a word, I'd love to hear from both of you. Why did M-Pesa work so well in Kenya? And why has it not replicated quite as well elsewhere?
You know, people ask this question a lot, and, you know, 2020 is always good vision, but it's a cocktail of things that happened. That's my view, and some of it is also formal, of unofficial view. One is that Kenya went through a transformation in leadership in 2002 all the way to 2007 that was very important in terms of changing the psychology of how Kenyans did business. We became more liberal, we became more open as a society, business was able to flourish. The second thing that happened is that Safaricom as an organization was extremely well led. It's an extremely well led organization and allowed innovation to happen. The third thing is that the regulatory environment in Kenya was light touch. It meant that we did not try to overregulate what we did not understand. Some of the things, I've just come from Jamaica and I was asked the same question about M-Pesa, and they've been going through massive pre-regulation of their mobile money, trying to learn. And I said, look, sometimes when you are trying to regulate something that is largely creative and largely innovative, you're bound to make mistakes. What you need to do is you need to step aside a little and allow yourself to make a mistake and see whether that happens. And fortunately for us in Kenya, the regulator did not provide a stumbling block. The fourth thing is that technologically, M-Pesa is not very complex. So the issue was, it wasn't really about the technology, it was about the social innovation. The idea that you could have, Safaricom had agents all over the country, and if you needed to cash money that was sent to you from a text message, you could find someone in the middle of the night, or in the middle of the day, who could actually convert your text message value into cash value. And that's a very, very important aspect. If you don't get your distribution right, then you can't get your M-Pesa to work. And the fourth thing is that we were not as banked then as we are now. And therefore, the idea of transferring money in this way seemed to be very, very, to serve a very, very important need. And look, a lot of studies have been done on M-Pesa now. A lot of countries are trying to replicate it. I know there's work going on in South Africa, there's work going on in East Africa to try and replicate it. And what people who want to look at M-Pesa need to look at, in our view, is you need to look at the entire value chain and see both the social side, the business side, and see what it is you need to do to replicate this. Because I can tell you, as we see it right now, there are probably other innovations that are taking place, but we don't know we're sitting in the middle of a revolution, and we're going to be here in conferences in 2 years discussing the next innovation. I can tell you some of it has to do with things to do with how healthcare information is delivered. There are people sitting down in Kenya today coming up with applications about education delivery. There are people who are coming up, there's this new notion of the government as a platform. And a lot of developers are asking me, look, all we want as a government is just give us, all we want as a society is just give us the data. And what we'll do is we'll write to you any application to provide any service for any Kenyan. For example, people are telling me, if you give me data, I will make it possible for a Kenyan to get a passport in, as long as you guys can facilitate the printing, I can make it possible for you for a Kenyan to get a passport in 20, 30 minutes, if that's what it takes to print it. Or I can make it possible for a Kenyan to get a national identity card in 2 minutes. If it takes you 5 minutes to register your Facebook account or a Twitter account, and you have to have all these references, how complicated can that be? So we are now looking at other innovations that M-Pesa will facilitate, because you see, one of the things that and I know I'm going beyond what you asked me, one of the things that you might want to ask is, look, M-Pesa will also, M-Pesa and other mobile payment methods will also enable us to get into a digital economy that we could not have if we relied on credit cards. So, for example, right now there are people who are writing applications that enable Kenyans to digitally make any payment they want to make. We are working with support from Gates, the Gates Foundation, on a study to find out how to facilitate digital payments in government. And the kind of statistics that have come through that study suggest that the impact on our economy of just digitizing payments would be huge. Already, and M-Pesa has validated it. So in about 3-4 years, it is our hope that every Kenyan can make a payment to government in digital form.
So here, each of these cases, Sendhil, involve a felt need on the part of the beneficiaries. So, I mean, in the case of M-Pesa, it's very small, transfers of very small amounts of money. I love the tagline, send money home. I mean, it captures what it's about. Say something about how one ensures that the design responds to a felt need.
Let me go back to the earlier question as well and talk a little bit about, what is it that M-Pesa is telling us? Because I think from that we can understand the design. And I think you had mentioned that, will M-Pesa spread? What will keep it from spreading? And to me, M-Pesa is like the canary in the coal mine. And I think the other canary in the coal mine is a book that many people haven't read, but I think everybody in this room should read. It's called Portfolios of the Poor. And it is fundamental. And I think M-Pesa plus Portfolios of the Poor really tell us something about what it means to be poor. And you had said, what are the other interventions coming down? And I think, what is it that the two together tell us? I want to go back to something you had mentioned about, you want to text, you get money in the middle of the night and you want to be able to convert it, convert it quickly. This is a story that all of you have surely heard. The poor having a certain urgency around what they need to get done. And the urgency isn't around big amounts. It's around small amounts. And I think what all of this research, what M-Pesa is showing us, is that the lives of the poor are lived very locally at very high frequencies. In Portfolios of the Poor, for example, they simply just tracked at a weekly level, at a daily level, what do the finances of the poor look like and what are they doing with money. And they are voracious users of financial services. They're putting, X shillings here, pulling out Y shillings here, small amounts, constantly juggling. And the lives of the poor, if you look at it through that lens, many of the financial products that are already out there, say, that moneylenders offer, they all have the feature of, most of them have the feature of small amounts for short frequencies. Payday loans in the United States are like this. And it's because the poor are sort of constantly fighting a fire. If you want to understand what their life is like, you should think about what your life is like with time when you are busy on a deadline. You're constantly going from one fire to the other. Every minute counts. It feels like, God, if I only had an extra hour. That's what the poor feel like with money. And they're constantly moving that around. M-Pesa, I think, is amazing in that it basically gets to that point. It gets to that point where we're able to transact at the level of seconds and actually have reliable delivery at that level. That's what the moneylender tended to provide you traditionally. Now we have a digital platform that provides it. Banks never provided that. Banks were open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, except for bank holidays, of which there seemed to be an insane number. And that was a huge hole in financial services. Now, I think there are these high-frequency, so it's sort of, I don't want to go on too long, but kind of if we want to understand the lives of the poor, we have to understand the high frequency at which it is operating, and the designs have to match that high frequency. And I think that's the power of information technology. That's what M-Pesa is doing, and I think that's what we can do on so many other domains.
In both the case of M-Pesa and the case of Ushahidi, which was another example of an innovation in response to a truly felt need during the violence after the 2007 election, what I want to get to is the role of trust in each of those cases, because in each case, there is a reliance on trusted intermediaries, right? I mean, those who are, there's a network of intermediaries when it comes to M-Pesa. There's a network of those who are putting forth information on points of violence, et cetera. How important is that? How important is that trust, that sense of trust in the design, Sendhil? And I'll turn back to Paul.
I think it is important, but I actually would say that's not the fundamental bottleneck, by which I mean, normally we roll out these big programs in big scale and then ask people to trust us and make long-term bets. And that's usually why trust becomes very... M-Pesa has the feature that many private sector products have in our lives, which is you can try a little bit. If it's working, you can try it a little bit more and kind of grow up that trust. And I think as long as interventions have that feature of I try, I see that you're not screwing me, I keep kind of expanding, I think that the feeling of need is so big. I think that trust is an issue, but I think it's very much a solvable issue. I think the more profound issues are having a better understanding of what is the actual need, what are the lives of the poor like. I mean, the conversation around financial services, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, was all around long-term savings, which obviously is still needed, but there's just a big gap between our understanding of the need and the actual needs, and to me, that's much bigger. If you provide a value proposition that you allow people to try and kind of use and get accustomed to, I think trust will bridge its own gap.
I have a different view. I actually think that trust is central because of exactly what you're saying, for the reasons that you said. You see, there are two brands I want to talk about quickly, and I'll just use an illustration. And I saw James Mwangi, I met with James Mwangi earlier today let me just use his example. In a meeting with the team from the bank the other day, they took me through an illustration about delivering aid. There's a contract they have to deliver aid to marginal communities. Every year, we have a shortage of food in certain areas, and we have to send food aid. And then this model was changed, I think last year or the year before, I don't know the facts, but it was changed so that we can deliver money to communities through digital means. And I think the bank was able to do it. And what you found is that instead of giving grain, which is what we normally do, you give money. And the effect of that has been that people now can choose the food that they want to eat in those communities. And the food economy has come in to those communities to respond to the fact that these guys now have money. But previously, if you're thinking very quickly, what do I need to do? What you think to do is let's just give them grain. So you have these planes dropping off food to people who may not necessarily want to eat the food that you're dropping off, But if you give them money through digital means, somebody can respect that. And the reason why that was possible is because the actors in that game were trusted brands. The bank is trusted, it's well understood, someone knows they'll give me my money when I need it. Perhaps, in some instances, sometimes, some brands get higher trust than governments do. That's just the way it works. I mean, Safaricom has a very high level of social empathy. It's not the only network we have in the country. It's not the only money transfer service we have. It's actually not technically complicated to replicate it. But what you want is to they've used their brand standing as a Kenyan company, as has Equity Bank, to create a relationship. It may be that the trust was created for the reasons that you give, because they delivered upon a service that was required. But that trust is important. After all, why do governments not get trusted, and yet they fundamentally exist to provide services? So I think trust is important.
And when you think about trust, and break it down, it's both trust in capability and capacity. Can you deliver? But it's also trust when it comes to intentions. On the capacity side, talk about where you now stand in Kenya when it comes to the delivery, the sort of e-delivery of services, e-governance. Are you where you want to be?
No, we're not where we want to be. We've got a master plan that we just launched 2017 that Kenya becomes Africa's most globally respected knowledge economy. We've shifted our IT focus to knowledge as a driver of national competence. Data, knowledge as a central issue. Three things. We're looking at ICT as a deliverer of public value, it's first pillar, which basically means that e-government is not about the technical ability to get a passport when you need it because you've got technology, but the value addition that comes with that. So if you don't need a piece of paper to travel, then you shouldn't have a piece of paper to travel. That's the ideal state. And whatever value that might be, we're going to be defining that. The second issue is that we want to have businesses that help government deliver on this promise. So we're working on a competency for all our businesses that has us we've actually got a target that says we want 20 new public sector co-facilitated innovations by 2017. And that's a hard thing to do. It's almost saying we want 20 new M-Pesas. That's ambitious, but I think we can get there. And the third issue is that we want ICT to be a big productivity driver in the private sector. Because we also have, forget about government, we also have private sector inefficiency as well. And I think we are now realizing that ICT can help private sector productivity in agriculture, in healthcare, and this is not government, but the private sector, in terms of management ability. So we're not where we should be. I think we've made good strides, but our vision is that by 2017, we've got a markedly different government and a markedly different nation.
And so now to the world of intentions. I know that you've worked to try to enhance government transparency. And the open government initiative is really, I mean, it's in part about transparency, but it's also primarily probably about knowledge transfer.
Yes.
In making sure that people have got basic data, basic census data, basic employment data, health statistics, et cetera. But talk first about the transparency question, about perceptions of transparencies, perceptions of corruption, and whether it's a kind of uneasy relationship between the government and the governed, or whether you feel that the social contract is beginning to work in ways that engender a sense of confidence.
I think it is improving. We had the highest level of government support with the previous president on the open data project, and that's the reason why it worked. Getting all our data, census data, financial data, and fortunately, the new president is also very much focused on this. In fact, it was in his manifesto, the fact that Kenya has to be an open government. He was involved as finance minister with the disclosure of financial expenditure data from the Treasury. But we need to go beyond. I think transparency is important, and we have an issue with citizen capacity, because we've noticed now that even when we make the data transparent, sometimes citizens don't actually know what this data means. So what if the GDP of one county is higher than the GDP of another? What does GDP mean when I don't have food on the table? And those are statistics that we talk about. So we need a different kind of individual who's clever at getting meaning out of this data. And that's why we need the private sector to come in, the media to come in. We feel that the media, multilateral actors, need to do a little more work. And also we need some of their data too, because some of the data that is very important in Kenya has to do with even things like how grain is distributed, how water is sourced, and some of this data doesn't sit with us as government, it sits with multilateral partners. So there's a lot of work to be done with transparency. But the bigger effort, I think, has to be that we need to do more work to create awareness and understanding by the citizens about what transparency really means. Because we assumed that if we had the data out there, they would understand it. But it doesn't work like that.
Sendhil, I could see you taking notes, so give you a chance to comment.
I love what you said about you put the data up there, how does it make sense to the individual citizen, and we need sort of individuals to arise. I sort of often think of nowadays about this notion of data entrepreneurs, and I think that in the past, when government has been very successful, it's often laid sort of the infrastructure off of which entrepreneurship can really thrive. And I think that what we'll see in the next 10 years, hopefully, is governments doing more like what you're doing, which is kind of laying out a lot of data, a lot more than you can kind of imagine. And laying it out in such a way so that we say, okay, well, we'll make some effort to kind of get this to the citizen, but what we'll really do is make a lot of effort to allow data entrepreneurs to arise who can kind of take this data and use it in ways that we can't possibly imagine, because none of us can ever, no one person can imagine what's going to be used for. And sort of the power of that entrepreneurship, I think, has a chance to be really transformative in all of these sectors, because there is so much data, from transparency to health to education.
I'm going to give you a chance, because we've got 30 seconds to go, only 30 seconds, to just Sendhil, to share with us your notion of a glowing pill cap. It just came to mind last night as I was forgetting to take my antibiotics.
I think glow caps is an example of sort of an intervention that we could have many, many more of. So the idea is lots of people die from HIV or diabetes because they don't take medications that could save their lives. Glow Caps is a beautiful intervention. It's a pill bottle that has a little glowing, that if you don't open it the right number of times every day, it starts by glowing, then it starts by sending a text message to you, then it sends a text message to your friends. So maybe that's getting a little creepy. But the point is, the impact of this has been enormous. Adherence rates to life-saving drugs have gone up, let's call it 100%. It's not 100%, but it's close to 100%. And the reason Glow Caps works, I think, is very much a good, like M-Pesa is another example of what we can have many more of. It operates in the moment. It's based on this information technology that allows you to give you feedback right then and there and allows you to deliver information when it matters. And I think for farmers and for health, for education, that type of real-timeness is going to be very, very important.
Thank you so much. What we're going to do is ask both Sendhil and Paul to take part in working groups with all of you so that you get to ask your questions much more directly, focused on the issue in which you are currently focused. But I just want to thank you both while we're about to turn to Alaska right now and to Neil. But first, please express your gratitude to these two. So as we're being joined, don't forget to sort of look on the screen, because occasionally it will tell you how you can connect digitally, how you can be doing your tweeting, how you can go on to GPF Connect and ensure that you're making all your appointments, because nothing is going to glow. We haven't figured out how to make that glow for you, but also how to take a look at how to have your friends and family who are not here take a look at some of these proceedings. So Neil, the question is, can you hear us?
Yes, hi Jane.
Hi, tell us first about where you are, show us where you are, tell us about this Fab Lab.
Great, well I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but I'm delighted to be in Anchorage with the Cook Inlet Tribal Council setting up a Fab Lab for Native Alaskans. And if I may, let me just take a minute to explain the background to why we're here, and then I'll take you on a tour of the lab.
Yes, go ahead.
Good. So today's about digital. There was a digital revolution in communication to send data digitally. It lets me see you now from Anchorage. It lets a farmer price crops with a cell phone. Digital revolution in computing, among many other things, puts libraries and books online. But what's happening now is a digital revolution in fabrication. It makes it possible to turn data into things and things into data, to connect digital and physical. So think of this new digital revolution as completing the promise of the last two, to let the digital world come out into the physical world and the physical world to go into the digital world. So this is a story that began in 1952. MIT made the first computer-controlled milling machine. With the merging today, you can think of it as like the personal computer revolution, but for fabrication, making these tools accessible. So Fab Labs, the space around me, is about 50K in equipment of the range of capabilities. There are about 200 of these today, north, south, east, west, rural, urban, providing access to the tools. So now let me take you around. We're just in the process of setting it up. So over here is one of the biggest tools. This is a 4-foot by 8-foot by 1-foot milling machine. You can make mill parts on it. More than that, you can make tooling for casting and making composites. So that's used to make boats, bicycles, turbines. Whole houses have been made on that machine. Over here are computer-controlled lasers. These are easily the most popular machine. With a high-power laser, they cut stocks of material very precisely. So you assemble 3D structures quickly from 2D parts cut on the lasers. Over here, we have a suite of tools for electronics. These program sensors, actuators, motors, high-speed, low-cost computer chips are used to make DIY radios, internet, things like that. Over here, we have a sign cutter. that's used to make printing masks, flexible circuits, and antennas. Behind that is a very precise subtractive tool that we make circuit boards and tooling for molding and casting to do production runs of parts. Over there are 3D printers. We use them. They're frequently thought to be the digital revolution. Maybe 20% of the time that's the best tool. Otherwise, these other machines are more convenient, but those are used to print parts. Here we do molding and casting, production run, etching, sandblasting, processes like that with parts made from all of this. And then this is now supported by a suite of design tools, content sharing, and online video. And so with the tools, farmers have made sensors for agriculture. A project started in Jalalabad, Fab Lab, made citywide internet. It's now running commercially in Kenya. Businesses are started with the tools. And one of the most interesting things are classes. Inventive people often don't fit. They question assumptions and race far beyond local opportunity. And so rather than online distance learning, we're teaching classes in a Fab Academy where students have peers with mentors in labs like this, then link globally for content sharing. So it's sort of a distributed network, not a distance network. Then these are used to create infrastructure. In the US, Representative Foster has very interesting legislation to make a national Fab Lab network. In Barcelona, where there's 50% youth unemployment, they're deploying these as part of the city's infrastructure, so anybody can make anything. And there's commercial, you go to market by shipping data that's produced on demand. So that's the current state of the technology. Again, this was about 50K in equipment. Then in the research roadmap in the lab, we're moving towards actually digitizing the materials themselves. So with one machine, you can do the capabilities of all these machines, and you can unbuild as well as build with them, and eventually assemble at a microstructure like the Star Trek replicator. So that's the research supporting this. But the lesson to draw from that is in the history of the internet was invented in the era of mini computers, not yet at the end of it. And this is roughly analogous to the moment when the internet was invented. So this is now creating sort of a real internet of things. You don't have to wait 20 years for the research to finish. Anybody can make anything anywhere. What we have found, though, is that breaks all the boundaries of aid, education, industry. Those are traditionally done as separate things. If anybody can make anything, it cuts right across it. A facility like this can do all of those things. And so the biggest challenge we found is catching up with the organizational capacity for it. That part I thought was easy and was hard. I thought the research was hard, and that's going very quickly. On the research, the most exciting next step is with the tools I just showed you, among all the other projects, you can not only make things, you can make machines. And so we're transitioning to a stage where the machines make machines, and you come to a Fab Lab to make a Fab Lab. And so with that, now I'll hand off on stage to show some examples of that.
Okay, here's your chance.
My mic working here? Yeah, so as Neil mentioned, you can make machines that make things, and we brought two of them with us, and I want to do a really quick demo of the one on your left. And this was a machine that was designed by one of Neil's students, Jonathan Ward, from the Center of Bits and Atoms, and it is a 4-axis roll-fed vibrating knife cutter. What does that mean? Its purpose is to do most of what a laser cutter does at 1/10 of the cost. As Neil mentioned, laser cutters are the most popular tool, but they are also incredibly expensive, which makes them a little hard to acquire. I'm caught on cables here. So this machine is still in the research phase. Bear with me here. It's a little loud. And what it's doing is it's vibrating a tiny little X-Acto blade, like a 5-cent X-Acto blade, at 60 times a second, and driving it around under control of this computer here. And I have a screen, you can see the interface on it. It's very simple to use. And the mechanism is the same that's in an electric razor. It's just a solenoid coil that vibrates it back and forth. And so this, produces simple shapes, 2-dimensional shapes, which you can then fold up into make 3-dimensional shapes. So Here's my little piece of cardboard. You can make much more complicated things in little circles, and I brought with me, this is I cut it on this machine here earlier today. This is a fold-up box. You can fold it up into a little part box. If I crease all the lines here, it'll take me a moment, but. And so you can produce objects which would be useful around your lab as well, too. So that's the first machine. And then the other one that I have here is a miniature milling machine. And so 3D printers, which everybody is very much fascinated with at the moment, are a additive process. They place up layers of materials, but there's a very small number of materials that you can use. A mill is a subtractive process. It cuts away material. So you start with a block and then you cut away everything that's not the thing you want. And it works with a much wider variety of materials. So here's an example of the two machines. Let's see, what else can I say about them?
So we also wanted to show that, you can cut things like cardboard, which is low cost, which is great if you're trying to teach a lot of kids in a classroom how to use these things. You can't always 3D print. And so you may have, some people are fortunate enough to be able to make a 3D printed object, but it's very expensive even just to make one that's very small. So what you can do is you can use the same design files that you make this very small 3D printed thing. You can make a cardboard one in the classroom that's low cost, and if you have access to a Fab Lab like the one that Neil is in, you can make something that's large. And I mean, my 8-year-old kid made this. It's super simple tools to make things that are tangibly useful to a family, and the skills that you use to design this, you can translate whenever you want to go, you graduate from high school or you have like a small industry in a community. These skills that you learn using these very small, inexpensive tools translate to the larger manufacturing processes that are used, by all the huge companies in the world.
And if I could comment on that, the tools are only a few $100s in parts, but have tremendous resolution. And what that resolution means is with the mill, you can make a circuit board and make a cell phone electronics or make a radio for an internet. Or with the cardboard cutter that looks modest, you could make a microscope or make eyeglasses, or for example, have been done with tools like that. And so they look simple and cheap, but have great performance. And in that, it's very analogous to the early PCs that were considered toys until they upended the mainframe industry.
Yeah, when you have the ability to make small custom circuits, you can do it. I don't remember what his name was, but the glow cap thing. That's something that you're making an object be smart, and that we already have the ability to give these tools to everyone. So if every kid in the community knows, like, oh, I can make a circuit board that can make the glow cap glow, then how many more innovations will we see? I mean, we'll see a ton, because kids have a lot of time, and if you give them cool tools, they will make fun things that we wouldn't even think of. So that's really, I think, what drives me to give these tools to more people.
And it's a really exciting time as the cost of these tools, which used to be incredibly expensive, are coming down so rapidly. Because one of the things that I feel is really important is access to a technology at a young age lets you leverage that so much more in the rest of your life. Like just the exposure of being able to play with this technology, you jump the imagination gap, and you now think when you grow up later, like, oh, this was like a thing that I used to do when I was a kid. You start from a new baseline. And as Neil pointed out, we're at an inflection point where we had the Industrial Revolution and then we had the Information Revolution, and they're now coming back and they're meeting together. And it's an opportunity for everybody to get on board in this third wave, which is the combination of the industrial and information meeting together, where bits become atoms and atoms become bits.
And I'd like to pick up on that comment, if I may. There's a lot of discussion of innovation and knowledge of economy, but again, innovators are generally strange people. They don't fit, they don't follow rules, because what they do is question rules. And so we find all over the world, rural, urban, north, south, rich, poor, those sort of people are typically sort of marginalized in society because they don't behave well in formal institutions, yet they're the real drivers of innovation. And so as these tools go in the field, we find they act as magnets for these inventive people who leap ahead of local opportunity and creating environments for them, empowering them is what I find most exciting. Elite institutions can take, thousands of people. The planet has far more brain power than that. And so bringing tools to the people locally and then linking them globally is the great opportunity I see.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I want to turn up the lights a little bit so that we have time for about 2 questions of our makers, and including of Neil. So if there are questions on the floor, if not, I will keep on talking. Just take a quick look. Good. I can barely see, but there you are. This is considerably less alarming than a couple weeks ago when Chris Anderson demonstrated for us a homemade drone. So I'm just feeling a whole lot better.
I didn't bring the cardboard drone.
Give us a sense, though, of cost. I think you noted, Neil, that each of these Fab Labs costs this is about $30,000, is that right, worth of machine tools?
Let me give it in powers of 10. A research lab like mine has $10 million tools. It has a workshop that has $100,000 tools. That was the background as outreach we started setting Fab Labs. The Fab Lab all told is say $10,000 tools. But you have tens of thousands of dollars here. With it, you can make machines like you see on stage. Each of those is a few $100 parts. No one of them yet makes everything, but a few of those lets you make a complete facility for thousands of dollars. And then with those machines, you can make little few $100 machines that help you get started. And so those powers of 10 are very, very similar to the cost curve from mini computers to PCs. So it's really like the economics of personal computing. And if you replay that script, all the things that happen with PCs of it's a toy, it'll never make a distance, to it changes the world, are exactly what's happening as we go down that cost curve.
So thank you so much, and thank you to both of you. Let me just as we close, note that we really opened with the question of how digital data can inform policy, how it can enhance government capacity, and how it can spur economic activity at all levels of society. What this shows us is it's not just at all levels, but it's in all places.
And if I could leave the audience, in signing out, to pick up from that, the challenge I'd love to give you is what we're doing is we collectively, this technology means anybody can make anything anywhere. And what does that mean for how you live, work, and play? It really means a whole new set of social structures and organization to catch up with it.
You've just said much better what I would have said, much better. Because I do think, we've often worried about the isolation, not only of geography, but sometimes of politics, that many are feeling. You're operating in places like Afghanistan, that we would consider to be a very hard location from which to innovate and, in fact, connect to a peer network internationally. So to us, this is an enormously important innovation. It was important to us to not just meet with Neil here as we did a couple of years ago, but in fact see him in situ so we could picture that Fab Lab, picture the opportunity that it represents, and not only admire your incredible pants, but your incredible innovations. So I want to thank.
If I could, can I sign off with a 15-second story?
And here's your chance.
Okay, the 15-second story to sign off with is one of these Fab Labs is in Giza. Colleagues there called them during the last round of fighting, concerned, how are they doing or how are they surviving? And they laughed and said, oh, it was like one of our best days ever, because all the bright, inventive, creative people who have no interest in sectarian conflict instead went to the lab and got work done. And so for me, that's a vision of the future.
So my favorite learning from this session, Neil, is that innovators are really odd people. So know that you're in a room filled with really odd people, each of whom represents a really good investment. So Neil, thank you so much for making this happen. Thank you so much for joining us.